And you've seen your HDMI, Hunter?
Yeah, we want to plug in and test it before.
Yeah, let's make sure. Because there's got to be a remote somewhere. And here's a little.
Appears to be.
If you want, I've got another one in my bag. Here it is.
Alright.
So it's got a laser, this other button, and just flow with it. You want a copy? Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately Susie couldn't make it today. So.
Visually, I'm not a good replacement for her.
Pardon?
Visually, I'm not a good replacement for her, but I can't see it.
You are a bit uglier, yes. It's that outdoor plumbing that doesn't do it for me. Thank you for the comment. It's very much appreciated. It is
I'll think about it. That's good. Think about it. Yeah, right here, Peter.
Absolutely.
Got power here.
One left, but there's always one on the floor somewhere behind the desk right there.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Rather you put me down and you do.
No problem. Yeah.
Do you walk around or do you stay at the podium?
No, wherever you need me to.
Podium? It's up. You're the speaker. You're in the driver's seat.
Now part of this is standing at the podium.
Okay.
Part of this is that I'm doing a demo, so I have to type a bunch.
Okay. Do we have that one?
Did you hear that?
Yeah, that was a G-tap. It was kind of cute.
I can shout.
No, there's one free up here in the corner.
I find this like hilarious where no matter how many like tech people you get in a room, every single time there's an AV system, this always happens.
Oh, there's a wireless microphone here. That's cool. Everybody on the right.
Some kind of karma.
Basically.
Yeah.
It's like, I know what you've done to your REL distributions this week, like, no AV for you. I think it's plugged in.
It's got a light.
The lights on?
Yeah. No, it's got a light. It's good.
Oh, okay, so it's just muted somewhere.
back in about 5 minutes. Oh, I was trying to, right?
John, yeah.
He said, let them know, so I'm letting you know. All present today. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's on. It's on.
Wow, I touched that chair and all hell broke loose. Good morning.
Sorry, gents. All right. Now we can test it. Yeah. Sorry. Yo. Nope. Wait. Try again.
Testing. Oh, it's nice.
And it picks you up back here.
You have to hit the volume up like 80, 90% what you hear. If that is affecting your recording. No. I'm just sitting right behind there. Sorry about the squeal.
All prep work, all AV geeks in here. Yes.
Yeah, it was good. Hey, when in doubt, just turn it all up.
You'll find it. It was fun at the same time when I had my customer share, and I thought, I bumped into the thing, I was like,
What's that? What's that?
Do you have a way to capture my screen?
A what for your screen?
A way to capture what's on my screen?
Do you want to display it? Are you looking to display it to that screen?
Yeah, because I have slides. So.
And that's the problem. The camera is not focused on the slides.
Sure.
Yeah, I did.
You have HDMI?
I guess, yeah. Well, I was just gonna like do a quick time recording and send it to you, since there's demos and stuff.
I mean, I can swing the camera and capture like the screen.
Sure. I guess I'll just put it
Plus,
on
it's
the
probably
screen.
good to the audience see it as well.
Yeah.
Tried it, yeah.
These people are going to be remote, sitting in their jammies at home, so these people may be able to come in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Drive around here is easy, especially a Saturday morning, because even the mall are.
It's turning on.
Or, well, I guess they have to be on. They're just.
I'm assuming it's turning on.
It's the only time my GPS ever tells me I have to take It's supposed to be a garage on the opposite side.
Saturdays and Pacific while we get one.
Yeah. I'm not sure how that, I saw it up there too. I wasn't, if I had asked somebody else, I would say.
It's blinking.
Whereas
it wasn't blinking before.
Yeah.
I just can't read what it says.
Saturday is really nice.
Hour. I assume it's taking a while to heat up, warm up, maybe?
Yeah, part of it. So, you take us to the next level, and you take the side of it.
Oh.
Little weird the first time you take it, especially if the horse is correct.
Good morning.
All right, are we started?
Well, whenever you want.
All right, go ahead and kick it off.
All right, here we go. Private to public. Boom.
All right, guys and lady, wherever you're sitting.
right here.
Oh, you're standing. Oh, by the coffee. Okay, I can understand that. Good morning. By the way, we're now recording. We don't normally start this early, so I can't be a potty mouth, and neither can you. Welcome. As always, how many people here are looking for jobs? How many people here are looking to hire? After the meeting, in the back of the room, go meet up and find your next great job or your next great employee, depending on your perspective. I'll remind you afterwards. This is our second meeting here, so thank you again to our wonderful sponsors who pay for this space. And thank you to And thank you to the kind gentleman who I unfortunately don't know your name, who provided the coffee to get your caffeine fix. And thank you. And that was he did that on his own. That wasn't even requested, so that's awesome. Unfortunately, Susie, who normally provides it, she felt doing something with her daughter was more important than us. Oh, I know. It is absolutely horrible, and I cried on the phone when I talked.
Take away on.
Yeah, I cried on my email when I talked to her. Okay, today's talk. I went to the DevOps DC, I think it is, meet up in Arlington a few months ago, and Hunter spoke on Teleport by Gravitational, correct? That's how it works, which is an SSH type thing. I'll let him explain it more. He does it much better than I do because he knows it better than I do. I thought it was an awesome product. I thought it was an awesome presentation. It is open source, like everything we talk about here. So I asked Hunter to come and talk to us because it related to what we did. And I thought it was a good, relevant topic for us. So thank you to Hunter for doing this and coming out way too early on a Saturday morning for most people. What kills me is with my new work hours, I now get up earlier on a Saturday to come here than I do to go to work. So,
Bragging or complaining?
Both. No, but then I'm also at work until 7 o'clock at night. So it's a trade-off. It sucks and it's good.
Better for traffic.
Yeah, that's exactly why I did it. So I will turn it over to Hunter. And I thank you very much and enjoy.
Cool. Well, thank you kindly for inviting me out to this. It is kind of early, but I also support people in Russia and South America, so I'm up at like 5 a.m. doing stuff, so this isn't super painful for me. So my name is Hunter Madison. I work at Decisive. You probably never heard of us unless you're in the trucking space, but we essentially do service management and the equivalent of medical records for trucks. We're on 70% of all rolling trucks in North America, so there's a 7 to 10 chance that when that Mack truck cuts you off while you're driving, I can tell you who owns it and call them for you.
Ooh, what's your phone number?
Not on camera, but can give it to you after. Today I'm going to talk about Gravitational Teleport. It's a tool that we've been bringing in as, you know, we're gearing up for some more intense security audits and getting the security best practices in place. It goes and helps dealing with user management and SSH sessions, auditing, recording, all the stuff that you have to do to, you know, check the boxes when you're looking at something like, you know, FedRAMP, FISMA, like, yeah, I have everyone's session, I rotate keys, it helps with all that. So yeah, if you want to email me, I'm hmadison@decisive.com. Today I just want to go through, you know, talking about how to get people to want to change because, you know, I'm sure we've all been in scenarios where just IT products and solutions have been forced upon us and it's not particularly fun. Talking about what I've commonly seen people do for access, what Teleport gives us, and then I have a couple of small demos just to run through and show some basics of how everything works. So a bit of a personal anecdote, and I could not for the life of me rotate this photo in Keynote, but yesterday was my mother's birthday, so happy birthday, Mom. And I had to bake a cake for her because I'm the only one at home. Your stand mixer comes with a bunch of attachments. You know, your dough hook, a whisk, and a paddle. My mother taught me how to cook. So every time I needed to mix something, I've always used the whisk. But that's incorrect because you only use the whisk when it says to whisk in recipes. You should be using whatever this thing is whenever they say to stir. So I looked up how to do this amazing pound cake, and they're like, well, you should cream butter and use this attachment. And only then did I realize that for 15 years I've been using this stand mixer wrong. Everything that I did with this whisk came out fine, perfectly edible, wonderful baked goods, but sometimes there's just a better way, and sometimes those ways are identical. And I put this anecdote in, one, because I'm filling time since my boss was supposed to take this slide, but two, it just, like, the thing with teleport that you should be keeping in mind if you're looking at bringing this into your organization is that think of this as just SSH improved, not necessarily as a replacement mechanism for what you're currently doing. I think a lot of people, when you say, well, we're switching from SSH to teleport, no, you're not. You're really just, you're switching from a, SSHD on a box to a more clustered solution. So access change. I mean, we all know people don't change. I don't know if you all have your Emacs configs or Vim configs, how long you've had those things, how many new lines you add versus how many lines you delete. I've used the same 50-line Emacs config since I started using Emacs like 4 years ago. I'm sure people have Vim configs that are older than me that have never changed. And the thing is like end-user workflows are generally set in stone. Back to the whisk example, my mother, even when I explained to her the difference between those two things, still insists on using the whisk for everything that she throws in that stand mixer because she's been doing that for 50 years. The other thing to keep in mind with these workflows, though, is from a technical perspective, when you have a company of 5 people and logging straight into the production database is okay, that's not cool when there's 50 people, but those workflows generally don't change as you scale up. Oh, let's just SSH in and edit a file is great when you have 1 server. It's not going to work when you have 100 or 600 or 1,000 servers. And the thing that I have seen is, unless you are explicitly solving someone's pain point and removing a hassle or making their lives easier, if it's a lateral change from one thing to another and there's not an immediate benefit, it kind of gets hard to sell. So something else to talk about, specifically with end-user workflows and security, is that laptops will get stolen. I think this is the common one. You see this all the time. I don't know, Washington Post, I remember there was like a 5-year span. U.S. government employee, laptop stolen while riding the metro. It had everyone's social security number in the country, everyone's credit card data, just like these massive chunks of data sitting in encrypted on a laptop that just got grabbed by someone on the metro. And having to deal with that and rotate those credentials and dealing with that, it's a nightmare. This happened to us, by the way. One of our developers, his house broken into, all of his electronics gone, including this wonderful MacBook that we shipped him. We had to get him a new one, rotate all of his keys, his email password. Nightmare. I mean, the guy was okay, but just like not fun for everyone involved. There's also audits that I think float around when you talk about a lot of this security stuff. ISO, PCI, FedRAMP, NIST. I don't particularly like any of these, but the problem is that I'm also not necessarily the driving force. There's a line between security, which I think everyone in this room agrees is important, and security theater, which is 90% of what these documents are. I think, for example, like ISO 27002, since we're dealing with that at work right now, there's a bunch of good stuff in it, like rotate your passwords, use appropriate encryption, document things. And then there's a bunch of crazy stuff like you should have these logs in this format with this retention period and have them accessible for all time and for all space on a server that nobody will ever log into that can't access the public end. Like, a bunch of craziness. The thing, though, is, sometimes you're kind of forced into doing these things. Generally, if it's PCI, you handle credit cards. If it's ISO, somebody asks. If it's FedRAMP, you want to dance with the United States government and get our tax dollars back in the most roundabout way fashion possible. And the thing that I try to keep in mind with a lot of this stuff is Don Norman in Interactions. Don Norman, he did design of everyday things, a lot of stuff on user interaction, at one point really big in Apple doing this stuff. He had this amazing quote, is that the audience either not understanding the rationale or simply disagreeing with the necessity for the procedures imposed upon them, sees them as impediments to accomplishing their job. And if you keep this in mind when you start talking about things like teleport and start talking about things like security in general or changes, it really, really helps to craft a message that sells well, to pull some of this stuff in. Like, you can't just change the workflow to make it more secure. You have to give a better experience, because the better experience is what gets people to move along, and you have to find a way to bring the security into that. We've probably seen stuff like this before. A user management playbook or chef cookbook, it'll make an account, it'll add SSH keys. Sometimes you try to keep the UIDs consistent across boxes. Sometimes it sets up a badge profile. If you work at my former employer, all your badge profile says is editor equals Emacs. People keep emailing me asking why this has happened, and I still don't think they understand that I set this up on purpose. So that's fun. The problem though with this type of scenario is like, what happens when new people join and need access? Hopefully you get their keys before they start. Like, we ask for their GitHub profile links, and even then they still didn't ever have SSH set up, which is like, all right, did you make a new account? It's kind of crazy. Normally you get their key like the hour before they have to do something critical and deploy, and they're expecting to scramble and push out on every single box, which depending on the way your system works is either trivial or painful. You know, you have to jam it everywhere, but then like also what happens when people leave? Is anyone going to tell you? You know, we actually have a Jira ticket type now for when people leave to do all the offboarding that we have to assign around to IT ourselves. It's a bit of a nightmare. Like, gotta run those scripts again. And, you know, I have found, looking at some of these boxes, there are keys from people who have worked at the company 5 years ago, still active, the user accounts are still valid. Like, you don't get the audit that you on some of this stuff. What happens though when, you know, people start doing bad things, you know, access changing, screwing with stuff, app consoles, you know, if, I don't know how many people support like Ruby on Rails or Python or Django at their job, they have a console that loads the application and lets you do whatever you want, no admin restrictions, whatever. Rails also has this command called DB console, where when you type it in, it'll just open MySQL, Oracle, Postgres, and give you access to the database. Do you have that logged? Can you go and track ace back, you know, oh man, this table got dropped from the database, there wasn't a database migration, there wasn't a deploy, like who did this, you know? How do you go and play that guessing game when the only thing that you'll have is the application server connecting, doing the action, and a database entry that's like app user? The other thing that I've found is people like to install code onto boxes that should be automatic. Like, I try to build all of my servers, so if there's any problem whatsoever, the easiest and safest thing to do is you delete it, you make a new one. You, like, don't hassle with trying to fix it. And when we did that for an upgrade, they had like 20 applications they just hit on someone's user. And they got mad at us for deleting it when it said on the box, like, we will delete this at any time. So relay won't intend. The other thing that you run into, and here's a good one, what happens when people want to SSH on their BlackBerries? Like, this comes up. I don't know why it does, managers really. And then, you know, how can you debug some of these connection issues? Because what I have found, you get a group of users who are perfectly fine with SSH, and then a group of users who don't really use a computer as their primary goal but still have to deal with it. That becomes a bit of a problem. I'm also just going to go and say, like, writing keys out through your automation, it's not usable. Your end users don't have a good way to understand what state their account is in, because if it's in, like, it's Chef, for example, you have your Chef runs automated at a random time so you don't, you know, kill the Chef server. You know, one box might let me in, another box might have failed the Chef run. I don't have access to see the Chef run status, where is my user? Things like that. I found that we generally don't have a good way to diagnose these issues organizationally. My previous job, it was a nightmare. My current job, it's still it's better now that we rolled out teleport, but we still get questions and tickets from users being like, I can't log into X server, why? Without any real way to give them a good back and forth, besides sitting down with them and dealing with it. And then the other thing that I found is, like, when something happens, we get minimal debugging. I don't know how many people have had to investigate, like, when something went wrong on the server, who actually did it, because nobody steps forward. But the best that I can do with OpenSSH, it generally is etc security, because we never really, like, I've never really had to go and customize SSH to give me that advanced logging that, you know, you would need in some of these more secure environments. And even then, the logging lives on the box. If you want to delete the box because you're in Amazon, like we are, and it's, you know, gone, what happens when those logs disappear?
I'm having a bit of trouble hearing you. Could you use the mic?
Is this better?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Well, then I was trying to be on camera at the same time. All right. So, so Teleport. Teleport is a system used to implement highly available bastion SSH hosts. It basically makes a cluster of servers that you can use to log in, skipping through your firewall, and get access to any server over SSH that lives inside of a, you know, protected network. So in our case, we have 2 Bastion servers publicly accessible, and that's the endpoint into our virtual private cloud inside of Amazon to go and do all the SSH stuff. It handles user access. It also handles logging of user sessions, which is really nice. The other cool bit, once you roll it out everywhere and your permissions are appropriate, is you can share sessions with people. So if you ever did stuff like a teammate or, you know, a screen share to try to type into an SSH window, you can just do it through Teleport. You give them a token and they can log in and you get to share the same SSH session. It is a generally stateless solution. So if you're concerned about things like going wrong because there's internal state on it, the only part that is stateful is the authentication server, and the only scenario in which the authentication server is stateful is when it is doing an upgrade. Outside of that, like, I spin these things up and tear them down. They just work. Zero configuration on my end. It is primarily open source to the point at which where you do get the source code to the enterprise version, public on GitHub. They do have paid enterprise support and extensions, being SAML, LDAP, IDP, role-based authentication, and Kubernetes. This is one of these cases where for us, we pay for it because we like paying for support, since, you know, I can call them and they will fix my problem. But depending on your workplace and depending on, you know, how you view it, support may or may not be necessary, and these features may or may not be necessary. This entire thing is backed on top of SSH. It's the same protocol that we have been using. It works just like OpenSSH. You can use your SSH agent. You can use the SSH client that you'll get on most operating systems. It works fine. All you have to do is go and put the proxy configuration in place. It also will work with a lot of tools built in OpenSSH that are capable of reading those configs. So we can use Ansible with Teleport the same way that we've been doing it with SSHD. You just make a config and you set an extra option for Ansible. It works pretty seamlessly. Parminko and NetSSH, Parminko being Python implementation of SSH, NetSSH being the Ruby one. It will read your config file and do the right thing and make it work with Teleport. Everything gets logged, and then InSpec, which is the Chef server testing stuff, it all works basically out of the box, you know, give or take, passing the different port. This is like a real SSHD replacement. You know, all of your standard Unix tools work out of the box. It gives you like your full terminal emulator. All the colors work, all the tools work, Emacs, Ed, Top, MC, VI, whatever, like all of that stuff just works. There's no trade-offs where it's like, oh, well, it's using a weird version of the teletype. No, it's just done. Alternative shells also work fine. ZSH, Fish, Limited Shell, your Git shell, it all works. It's, again, just SSH. It respects etc password. It will make real logon sessions if you have anything that cares about that. It gives you some environment variables if you really have to see the underlying user. Like, all of that stuff is available. And the way to think about Teleport, you have 3 layers to it. So there's first an auth server. This is where you actually manage the users, proxies, nodes, and trusted clusters. So this is the brain, I guess, of the system where everything to know about who can talk to what lives. They have join tokens, which can either be dynamically generated or statically configured. It's like a UUID you pass to it. and that's how it joins in. This is also where you're going to be configuring like your enterprise authentication stuff if you live in that world. It's, again, really the only stateful component of the system, and it's also really only stateful that I have found during upgrades. Once you do an upgrade, version upgrade, you can spin up and tear down as many of these as you need, and they'll just join themselves together and work fine. Proxy servers, so these end up being the face of the system.
That was nice.
Gremlins.
Gremlins, yeah, I turned off notifications for you, but who knows?
It was a proxy.
Yeah, basically. So proxy servers, I guess they're excited to be talked about. This is the face of the system. So for us, this is the part of Teleport which is exposed to the world. It routes all the traffics through the nodes, it routes all the traffics to other Teleport instances. It also hosts the web interface, which they do give you a full web-based terminal, which I'll be demoing later. And then there are the nodes themselves. This is just the server that you want to connect to. The cool bit about Teleport is it's written in Go. They have one daemon that you just configure to take the roles that you want. So for some of our servers, they take 2 of these roles, so we can log into the proxies. For some of the servers, they just are the node role. The local demo I have does all 3. Basically, all you have to make sure with these things is that your firewall will let this server talk to the proxy servers, and that's the connection that you need to make. Everything else flows. Decisives in Amazon, this is for the more visual people, a way that we have our stuff set up. So we have our proxy servers on one side. Through a load balancer, we just have a set of EC2 instances. I think there's 2 to 3 per the account. If they're running it, auth servers do the same thing. The auth servers, because they deal with the state, they deal with stating sessions, recordings, all the events that happen. They live in DynamoDB tables or S3 buckets. If you're not in Amazon or you don't want to use these things, you can also keep them on disk. They're moving to SQLite in version 3.2, so you'll have access to that. And then all of this just talks to our VPC resources. So this is, everything else. So all the apps and stuff that people care about. So we rolled this out around Christmas, and I've added this section just to talk about, the general adoption curve that I found across the various groups. Now that it's in, it's baked in, people have had to live with it. So operational engineers, I generally like it. My boss likes it. Other people on running other ops teams like it. Some of the line engineers have some problems. Developers generally like it. Data engineers and reporting users, I can't say on camera their comments. Windows users, I have a coworker who does all of his work on Windows. And the thing is he not only does his work on Windows, but he plays with his path on Windows. And I got a copy of his path. It's like a 64 kilobyte text document. And when you do stuff like that, it breaks. So once I got a clean Windows laptop and showed him having it work, he was fine. But until that point, it was just months of it's not working, it's not working, it's not working. No, it works. You have broken your path. And then project managers, I don't know why some of them have SSH access. They're really unhappy with this system because I've just taken away their access because you're a PM, why do you need to log into my box? So yeah, the more SRE type people, so like I come from a development background, so the people like it, tend to like it more than traditional operations users. The big comment that I got was, I don't understand how this helps me, which is fair, but at the end of the day, like, we brought this in because we need the auditing and the management, because we're doing these agreements and we're just at that point where we have 80 developers that we're supporting. We can't be doing this by hand across all of the accounts that we have to support, since Decisive has like 12 to 14 environments of our software running at any given time. I've also generally found that if you're good with SSH, like you know how to read the man page and edit the SSH config, you're fine with it. Most of the developers, once I showed them my sample config for it, have been making custom configs, so like they can type in, Rails console production, mainline, hit enter, and just have login through Teleport, get brought to the correct directory, get their, development console open and be able to poke around with servers. I have a wiki page, which internally they've just been adding stuff to it, so like they're pretty good about it. Their managers really like the auditing. Like, I got comments from one of the VPs where he was very happy that I explained that they're just environment variables now, because he's now pulling these environment variables in, including like the full recording of the session whenever his team is running like tasks on the server to do data management, which is really cool. Data engineers and reporting users tend to hate it. I have found, though, that they're using tools like Navicat, Datagraph, SQL Workbench, etc., where you can connect over SSH, but it does not respect your SSH config, since you're not doing the appropriate proxy setting stuff. It's not going to work. It's never going to work. Either give them a VPN or teach them how to, port forward, but they're not going to fight you. If you're on a Windows 10, version 1809 has the stock OpenSSH client as part of Windows Update. You do the update, you run a command, you have access to it. It will work with Teleport. The Teleport client does run on Windows. The trick being is that you use the Teleport client to generate the certificates, and Windows is OpenSSH to connect. I realize we're all on Linux here, primarily. Most people don't have to deal with it, but we end up supporting all 3 operating systems, and this is a nice selling point if people are like, well, it's a Linux tool. No, it's not. It's cross-platform. And again, PMs, like, people really don't like it when you tell them no. But this is an amazing way to tell them no. So, if you're thinking about rolling this out, here's my tiny guide. Pick a cluster topology. So, for us at Decisive, we have siloed accounts, either per customer or per activity. So we run 4 different production environments, 1 of them being our multi-tenant production, and 3 of them being production for clients that needed enhanced stability or other custom things. And then we run all of our staging accounts. What we do is we have a Teleport cluster in each of those environments, and then we join them all back to the multi-tenant production cluster, so you will log into there and have your access pushed out to all those other environments. This is nice for us because if one of our staging accounts is sick or we no longer need it, we drop the entire account in the Amazon level and nothing really breaks. We're not doing any joining in which that we have to like keep the stuff secure. And the other nice part about doing it this way is, you don't have to do links between virtual private networks. If you're doing this on-prem, like, it'll just be a case of how that gets set up. Unfortunately, I've never really dealt with on-prem stuff, but just knowing how you can do that is kind of important. Buy the enterprise stuff if you need it. Like, we're in a scenario where we generally tend to buy enterprise support. If you're a small group or, you're okay with the open source stuff, you can totally go for it. I'd strongly suggest, though, if you're having to manage, more than 200 servers and have more than 30, 40 employees and already have an identity provider in-house, it really is worth the money because you get really nice support out of Teleport that makes the initial implementation a whole lot easier and the initial training for users a whole lot easier. Label all of your nodes. So we're in Amazon, we pull the tags that we have on the Amazon control plane in. If you're on-prem in Azure, Google, do something similar. This is really nice because if you ever, if you're using their role-based stuff or you want to go to their role-based stuff, it lets you go and just say, this user is on, this development team. They can only talk to boxes for that development team. Solve so many issues with people stealing credentials you would not believe. You launch and configure all of your stuff, and then you pull SSH access, at an arbitrary date and time, and just don't tell them that you've done it. And that's what we did, and nobody complained. So roll out mostly successful. So I'm going to bring this up, and this might not matter to you, but there are a couple of points that I have problems with Teleport, having used it for 6 months. The first one being, so I end up spending, half of my time having to write additional software or make software changes in addition to just straight operational work. And the bit with Teleport that drives me insane is that there's no API for it. So some of the auditing stuff that we need to do, like I have this really nasty shell script to download everything in these S3 buckets, unzip all the log files and parse them. It would be nice if they could just give me a way to grab the stuff that I want targeted versus having to reverse engineer. It's looking like it'll change in version 3.3, but that stuff still is up in the air. And then the other bit, and this is more so if you're looking at buying, this only supports OpenSSH. They've been talking about investigating RDP support, and you can kind of make it work with other protocols, but there's no like real formalized API to just write the integrations yourself. If you need stuff like RDP and database access, there's a company called StrongDM, which it's only paid, but if you're in a scenario where you need that type of work, they might be better than Teleport. So yeah, I'm going to give a quick demo on some of this stuff, and if you need access to anything I demoed, I have everything up on GitHub. So I am going to close IRC. That's what was pinging me. So I use Vagrant locally. I just have a tiny little server that I set up.
Zoom in.
Oh, yes. I don't know why screen mirroring doesn't respect. Is this good? Alright. So yeah, I just have a small Amazon Linux 2 server. This is what we're running. I'm going to mute myself. No, I don't control the volume, so... Of course. Okay. So the program that you use to administrate Gravitational Teleport is called TSH. You run this locally on your auth server, and it's TCTL. TSH is the client. So this is what you're doing to go and actually administrate it. I'm going to add a demo user, and what this will do if you don't have an identity provider hooked up to it is it's going to give you a URL that you give the user to. Give to your user. So I'm going to throw this thing into Firefox. I'm going to say I don't care. I've self-signed this certificate. And now that I have this wonderful multi-factor authentication token, I'm going to pull up Authy on my phone, and I'm going to scan it. So I'm going to say, if anyone's wondering, I'm setting the password to demo123. Please do not hack me. So now I'm inside a Teleport. If you have multiple threats, this is their web user interface. They also have command line options to do all this. I'm not going to demo those because they will actually scream that the certificate is self-signed and you can't override that. Nice bit about security, bad for demos. But this is their web UI. I'll zoom in a little bit. Up at the top, you have a search box. So we have around 120 servers per environment. That just gives us a way to filter down what we want. You get a list of your hosts. If you bring in other clusters, because you can link these things together and share identities, the whole list here. And you can just do a login. So, hey, I've logged into my demo user. As you can notice that my shell isn't bash, and in this case it's fish. So all that fish coolness works. If I say, like echo hello, and type in EC, all the neat keyboard stuff works. I can go into VI and I use Emacs by default. I know like 2 key bindings for VI. Actually, I can't even set the file name because I didn't open it with it. Like, whoops. But VI works. I don't have wheel on this one. Right, but I can go into ed and be stuck forever. So, whoops. There's an upload and download, so if you do stuff like, want to use, select the file. Select a random screenshot from my desktop. I've uploaded the file. I can log back in. I mean, there's the screenshot. I can't show you an image file, but it's uploaded itself there. You can download files the same way. This little D that you see, if other people join your session, you're going to get a bunch of happy faces going down the side. So if you're in the web interface, you can see when people do it. I tend to use the web interface because I'm lazy, and it's very, very funny because they'll resize it to be the size of your browser window, and that has messed with a number of my coworkers more than once. Highly recommend if you want to get a good laugh.
It does upload and download?
Upload and download, and then you can use their command line client to do full SCP too, and you can use regular SCP provided by OpenSSH as long as you get your config file set up, which I can flash on the screen.
Is there an upload size limit to the web interface?
There is no upload size limit to the web interface put on by Teleport, but your proxy or fronting web server may have something to say about that. The question being, is there a limit on SCP? No, there's not. So the other cool part is, when you're an administrator, you can watch the sessions that were made. So I'm just playing back what I just showed you guys, hands-free. You get a nice video of it. This works with all of the stuff that runs through Teleport. If they use OpenSSH, because they're still connecting to the Teleport proxy, you still get this recording. So you don't lose anything. The one thing that I will say is they don't have a good indicator of when people are like port tunneling, and they don't have a good indicator of when people are actually using a different channel, like the SCP channel, to move files. But they have said that they're working on UI improvements for 3.2 and 3.3, so hopefully that makes it in there. Yeah, I mean, apart from that, their documentation is very, very nice. In addition to this, you have the full source code of everything, including the enterprise extensions, which is nice. So if you have a question of like, where is this log line coming from, what's going on, you have full access. They've generally said, like, you can, if you have support, email them privately, or just make a GitHub issue. You get a very, very good response from one of their engineers. Like, I very much appreciate their support. And just as another bit, since people were asking, I have this compatibility example thing where, you know, you just basically go, if you want to use the standard OpenSSH, the TSH command line needs keys in a particular format, and they're the standard OpenSSH keys. They live in another spot. You plug the stuff in, you set your user, and you just put this proxy command in, and it works. So yeah, it's, at the end of the day, it's totally standard. So I don't know. Anyone have any questions?
Have you compared this up against like VIPA and see, you draw the line between what that can do and this tool?
So we haven't looked heavily at VIPA. The big reason, though, why we picked Teleport over some of the competitors is one, from getting support for us is kind of a big deal, and we've just found that Teleport was giving us the best support for the pricing. I know that for some people that doesn't necessarily matter, but like, I have a team of 13 people, and we're supporting 60 to 80 developers, and I think like 1,000 to 1,500 servers at any given time. So like, working with Teleport has been much better than working with any of the other tools that I've found out there, if that helps.
Does it support automated backups of user credentials and stuff like that?
So all the user, if you are in Amazon and you deploy using DynamoDB, we have it set up to back up those DynamoDB tables. If you're doing an on-disk deployment, you're going to have to set up something yourself. But the other thing to keep in mind is that we use our SAML IDP through Okta to have people log in. So we could lose all of those servers, all of the data. All we would have to do is launch new ones and trust them back together. Users wouldn't lose their passwords or lose their two-factor because Okta manages that on our behalf.
I thought I heard you say earlier, if somebody did something bad with the default syslog or SSH, you really can't investigate Does this give you that capability?
Yeah, so, I mean, going back to the, session recording stuff, I'm not going to log into, but, in our work account, developers are only allowed to access a server through teleport, which means, I have everything that they have done in a text file on S3 as this weird JSON format that I've written tools to parse. So all of these recordings you can dig through to find things. And when people are saying like, hey, this application started having this problem at, 10:52 p.m. Thursday evening, I can go and use, their calendar view, pick Thursday evening, go to 10:52, see everyone who was doing stuff, and just, based off of the my knowledge of the way our ecosystem fits together and the applications stick together, start watching these sessions and, digging through these sessions and being like, well, did anybody run this command? And, I get stuff spit back out being like, yep, this person ran this command at 10:51, and it's like, well, this is the change that's happened. So it's very good at tracking changes for things. The other thing that I am working on that I didn't have ready in time for this, I'm trying to get Postgres to route through teleport, so you'll get all the SQL statements from like SQL Workbench recorded in the same interface too. So with any luck, I'll have that to show in a few months, or they'll merge it in and I won't have to do the work.
You said your deployment suggestions, disable SMS. So I'm guessing this thing runs on, it says like on some server, the listener runs on not 22, some other.
Yeah, so by default it's 3022. What we do, and what we're moving towards with all of our new stuff is that OpenSSH is available and is only listening for the default AMI user that Amazon sets in place. And we hide that port from everything inside the VPC. So to get access to that port, we actually have to spin up an emergency host and give it an appropriate security group to get in. By default, we're not letting people use SSHD.
But you're not completely disabling SSH.
No. I mean,
you still have a break class on.
Right. I mean, we, this is one of these things where they also talk about in their examples, like they have this cool Terraform example where they talk about how they set up like a, break glass scenario. But at least like for us, with some of the security stuff that we're getting to, we're pushing teleport in such a way that this is the only way that people are going to be going through servers unless the world is on fire, in which case there's explicitly a way that we have to go and start breaking some of these security things to get wheel access on these boxes and start to fix the stuff.
How difficult is it to deploy and integrate?
So I have found, the initial rollout took me about 2 weeks for one account. The harder part was actually going and getting everything updated in Amazon, so that way all the servers were tagged appropriately, all the access was tagged appropriately, and the training than actually installing teleport. I've generally found that when I need to go and mess with the thing, it takes about 10 to 15 minutes to review their changes and update our automation to do it. And the rollout itself is pretty smooth. They have a really strong backwards compatibility guarantee. And I think if I had to start this from scratch, doing it what I knew now, it would probably take a day or two. I mean, it's not very hard. The nice part about it being Go is it's one binary, no libraries needed. Just stick it on, keymod it, give it a config file, and have it run. All right, well, if anyone has anything else, feel free to hit me up afterwards, and thank you for having me.
All right, so now we have a little time. Anyone want to, any subject we want to just BS about, or do you want an hour of your life back? It's your call.
I want to hear more about Peter's server, this multiple Raspberry Pi thing.
Sure. If Peter's willing to come up and...
Well, I don't really have anything, well, I have a Pi sitting right there, but sure. So let me tell a little story from a couple of years ago. We were, as a company, out demonstrating huge scalability from a customer perspective. We have an audience of 3,000 people, and we wanted to show them that we had some tooling to allow them all to treat. And so we had them all basically treat as a competition. The one with the most treat would win. 3,000 people all tweeting at the same time. And in the corner, we had actually a rack of servers standing, the old-fashioned racks with all the lights and stuff like that. Made a lot of noise. And the idea was that was actually connected up and doing rules and accumulating. If everyone had the right tag and so on, it would actually come up the winner of it all. The prize was one of the computers that was running the cluster. I don't know how it happened, but within 2 minutes we had a guy with like 50 tweets or something like that. I don't know how you type that fast on the phone, but holy crap, that went fast. And the guy looked over there and he wanted one of those servers there. And cool, how he's going to get home with it, he didn't know, but that was what he was getting. Well, the problem was when he was announced as winner, we pulled away the tablecloth on the table there were, and it was a set of Raspberry Pis. And that was where the cluster was going to serve all those requests coming in. We had just put that over in the corner for display only, and it didn't do anything. So you want a Raspberry Pi. To me, that illustrates one of the powers of where computing to me is going, at least on a personal level. So I bought a couple of very old boxes. One of them is the Raspberry Pi. It just looks like a computer. It's one of the smallest, well, it used to be one of the smallest computers we had, basically on a single board computer, right? They're even smaller now. And they go full HDMI, everything else. It's kind of amazing that that little thingy-majig does what used to fill a whole room, and at much faster, a lot more capacity than they used to have on those. Put them together, and now we can start doing machine learning. Now we can start doing bulk processing. All the cool stuff that we needed to have huge data centers for in the past now fits in a small box that is yay big. And because we've done Pis for a while, it's one of the older do-it-yourself technologies. There are already quite a few things going on, and that one I posted was from Seer. They were running some of their data analysis on a cluster of Pis. This to me just is like mind-blowing. Going from what I initially fell in love with in IT was math, distributed computing. I like the math behind it, I like the options behind it, and this was behind, when we had barely had 386, actually we didn't have 386 at that point, right? I mean, it was like, holy crap, now computers can do this stuff. Now we can do that privately for no money almost, right? Someone posted that there was a $5 Pi at a Micro Center, and that is true if you want to buy one. So I guess you have to go in and come and leave a couple of times to have a couple of them. Yeah. That's it. And I saw does anyone know who EEV blog is on basically out there? Like, if you're into electronics, you probably are following Morgan, right? So he's one of those guys that if you don't like the topic, and he will bore you to death, but he will go into details with anything from microcontrollers and everything else. A couple of months ago, he posted that you can now buy microcontrollers, meaning stuff that runs that board, for 1 cent for the chip. Now if he bought it in bulk, so he bought 2,000. Just one little dumb chip, full computer, in a little box. And that's really changing it. So to me, what I'm looking at setting up the cluster is not, well, I know I can connect them together. It's finding the right project for what I want to run, and I certainly like to get into either machine learning or something else that requires that processing power. I do a lot of containers, as you probably know. So that would be one thing. I've seen some people trying it, and the problem is that it's based in Go, and Go doesn't like to run on anything other than Intel these days. So that will be the challenge, but that will just be, to me, an interesting challenge to do. The 3D printer, you can easily get a little holder for it, but one of the things I love organic about the Seer They just used packing foam, and it was sitting on a freaking table, and they were done. I mean, it was that simple to set up a dumb cluster that they were using, and that was processing data. The only thing they had done was to create a little board to deal with power that they needed for these guys. And because they had a piece of equipment that it was collecting data from, it also had connectors for that. You know, Pis are all about electrical communication. So that's what they had done as an example, but it was just Pi sitting on that little foam, all communicating together as a cluster. So I was looking for ideas. You know, to me, running a lot of containers would be fun, and whether that would be machine learning AI or something, you know, in a similar area of something fun. The reason it's a cluster would be, the reason we want to do it as a cluster would be, we wanted to do a lot of processing. I would like to do a lot of processing. And that could be like just reading tweets or something else and start dealing with that kind of level of data input. And if you can buy 5 Raspberry Pis for $5, and that gives you 5 times 4, so that's 20 cores of processing. That's quite a bit for less than $50.
How much do the cables cost?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, so I've seen a lot of people basically go out and they have this box full of their old cables from 50 million years ago, and that's where they get all that stuff. But the most expensive part of that is going to be the power supply. Right? But most of us have some level of old transformer, and you can get again from those Alibaba things a voltage regulator, so you can feed it in, let's say, 12 volt and make it into a 5 volt for 4 amps or something like that and run them all. That shouldn't be that big of a deal. Although most Pis do take 9 volts input, but I would not do that with zeros. I'm going to live your life 8 years before you do that.
As long as it's well done, it's fine, right?
Yeah. Well, the problem is heat. Like, the more power you put into it, the harder they're going to get. And those default little cooling elements you get when you buy them are not meant to be run hot. They're cute and all, but I would not want anything high processing. But that was the idea, and quite frankly, I got inspired at basically seeing how well used this idea is. I said, what we did 3 years ago now, 4, with Pis were kind of new. Pis are just, 09, I think they were introduced. And we did it as a joke because you win a computer. That was all you want, right? But still, that's a pretty cool thing to get. The zeros are and so I found a board that takes basically standard Pi 3, and then it has up to 5 zeros on top of it that are all connected using the USB connector, and that becomes your cluster. So it basically is as big as a Pi 3. But just maybe yay high, and that's your cluster of 5, or 20 cores cluster. That just blows my mind. I'm sorry. All right, and put in a little box, a little fan, and you're off you're going. Right, here's my big cluster of nodes. Right? So actually, this morning I drove by Micro Center and thought I could pick one up, and went, oh well, they don't open until 10, so I have to do that once I get back. But, I've seen a lot of places that sell, they announces these machines or these little single boards, $5–10. But if you buy them online, it's like $15 shipping on top of it. For a little board that is yay big and can go in a normal envelope, they want $15 or more to ship. I don't know. It reminds me of DigiKey. They sent me 1 chip. Yeah. Shipping was $25. Yep. Fun. So I mean, if you want to be part of that or have ideas what you want to do, I mean, I thought the idea would be that we don't just build one cluster, but that we all have something to play with and then share ideas of how we make it work, or maybe cool stuff we could do and show and tell for one of the meetings. It does open up this Pandora's box of how do you do distributed computing. How do you make sure that all of these machines stay in sync on state and everything else, or maybe we can make it simpler. Traditionally, you will have like a message system between them, and you will persist in all of them, or at least put them in memory. So if you send in, hey, here's a task, any one of them can pick up the task, and they will ensure that they will pick them up when they have time. That's a very basic way. And there are lots of messaging queue systems for Raspberries out there. Even the basic ones will do just fine, I think, for any kind of play thing you want to do. If you want to play it up, connect it to Twitter or whatever you want to connect it to. That was the idea. So if anyone here likes to play with those little guys and make fun things happen, and maybe connect it up to a series of, let's say, LEDs, I don't know what could be done, and have the cluster deal with it. The problem is that a single Pi can pretty much run a lot of this IoT stuff by itself. That's what it's meant to do anyway. So putting them in a cluster needs to solve a bigger problem than that, at least in my mind. But it's just what, yes?
Have you looked into Octopi? It's originally it was 8. I built one out of 4 with a controlling Pi. Mm-hmm. And they have some examples of using it for cryptography, mm-hmm. which are pretty...
Anything that deals with a lot of processing, where you basically say, here's a task, and I need to get all these data sources processed, and it may take minutes or days or whatever it does. Like, I think one of the, what you call it, not hats, frames that I found was from Octopi, but that's an option. I mean, I'm not selling any solution. I did buy or order the one that I talked about for the zeros. Mm-hmm. Could not find it in the US, so it's coming in from the UK. But it was like 15 pounds or something like that. It wasn't too big. Yes, sir.
Back when I first got next to the Linux community back in the last millennium, there was a lot of talk about Beowulf clusters, but I never got into that because that was way over my head and I had no need for it. But do you know anything about these things?
I was more on the DRDB, basically the side that is still in Will today. So clustering can be very complex depending on what problem you're trying to solve. So let's give an example. Like, let's say you have a database, right? And you want to make sure that no matter what happens, that database keeps up. So even if someone pulls the power of one of the machines or it blows up by itself, your users are not seeing downtime. That means dealing with state between each box, and it means dealing with, well, the client knew this IP over there, now we need to move over there, but the transaction it was in the middle of doing needs to be resumed over there as it was over there. There's a lot of things going on at the same time. What we have is we have mechanisms on top of I say almost said well here, but of Linux in general, that will piggyback all the boxes together and make a single control plane out of them. One of the things they will do at the very least is to do a virtual IP address, which means to the outside world, they look like one machine. You will talk to any of them. One of them will own the IP address we call the virtual IP address. But if something happens to it, and that could be, it didn't say, hello, I'm still alive within half a second or something like that, it gets thrown off the cluster and someone else takes ownership of that IP address. As a client, I'm still communicating, everyone is fine. Now, whenever I tell it to do something, let's say I tell the database to write data, now the system needs to ensure that all 3 machines have the same data, because I can't have a shared data source, because if that goes away, all my databases are gone, right? So one of the tricks is, and this is what we need, DRDB and I'm trying to remember what the general system used to be called. Beowulf did some of the same stuff, but they basically ensure that when you register a database, when you register Apache, when you register anything that deals with state, that each machine gets a copy of that state. So if something happens to any of them, you're still okay. That's tricky, because now we need to talk about, keep alive signals. We need to be able to deal with split brains. We need to deal with all kinds of technology issues of how long do we have to wait until we know something is wrong. You know, is it not responding because it was just a little bit busy? Or is it not responding because something happened, and how long should we have the client wait? Can we afford having one client say, oops, I need to try again, or does it completely hit from them? But if I'm in the middle of a TCP transaction, and the host goes down, that TCP transaction is going to be killed. There is no doubt about it. But is the client smart enough to resume that? That's what clustering makes, and that's when I started out, it was not just that side of it, but what happens when you have a database, for instance, that is split over multiple boxes, owning different data sets. But to the outside world, they look like one database. So you query the system to say, hey, I need to see all the users, so all my customers in Chicago. Well, that's easy because all those users are in one database that is in Chicago. But what happens if I want to say, well, I want to look at all the orders that may be in common between Chicago, LA, and New York, and there might be two databases in one. And coordinating that data and making that query as fast as possible so you're not transporting the whole database over the wire just to do a join. Is look at it from a math perspective. If you've ever seen how databases, particularly relational databases, are defined using math, looking at it when you add on distribution on it, of data like that, and coming up with the optimal data query path in distributed computers, is just amazing. Because you have to do some optimization to say, well, if I reduce the set over here versus reducing it over here, how can I make it, because your network is the slowest element. And now we can do that with a Pi. I mean, I don't want to put up an Oracle rack, but I could certainly put in a Postgres and start putting that up on multiple Pis. And the idea, again, of having distributed computing used to be that we want to have the data as close to where it's needed. So, for instance, databases tended to have all the local data local, and if they needed something globally, they would go out and query that, right? Because that hadn't happened as often as, like when you're in the bank, right? And you go into the, well, you used to go to the bank, went to the door, and got our money. We don't do that anymore. But when you went to the affiliate, they would have all your records locally because that was your bank. But if you were out traveling, they would have to reach back to your affiliate or to the central office to get your records. And that would take longer. And they may even flag you as a suspicious character because that may be an issue because you were not in the local area. And we used to deal with outage because what happened was if the main seat went down, all those local offices still worked because they had all your records. When the main office came back up, it was in all the transactions. So that was back when we couldn't just use our phone and make a transaction across the world or immediately afterwards. So they didn't risk too much. It's a very interesting problem to solve, but a cluster on a local machine deals with availability. And basically just taking a small machine and adding more of them to get a bigger machine. Which is the one I was thinking about for the Pis. But going in that direction that you're talking about, it's a very fun problem to solve. People have been basically doing that for nothing else than for work. And then some. Meaning it's an interesting conundrum to solve. And then once you start putting it into reality, you realize that the book knowledge goes out the window when you have to do it in practice. And you have to break all your rules because it doesn't actually work as nice and unique as the theory says. But to be optimal.
I used to run compute clusters. This really encompasses like the full gamut of like Linux administration, so much so that like I had a DHCP server where all the nodes pixie booted off of one central server. I had InfiniBand connections to a common data store. Everything was mounted with NFS. If I lost a compute node, I didn't care. I just rebooted it, re-imaged. And then users were actually using an API to run commands across all the nodes at once using the common storage. The biggest pain was when the SAN went down.
Yep, your single point of failure. Yep. Right, which is why I see more and more, for instance, we mentioned Kubernetes earlier, right? Kubernetes tends to now want to scale not having the shared storage, but each execution now have their own storage, so you can afford one of them going away without losing all the storage. And that's it is a single point of failure, right? It is, you want to keep state somewhere, and as you keep going, well, this is why we look at servers. They have more than one power supply, more than one NIC, more than one of everything. Then I look inside and say, well, you only have one bus. You know, how far do you want to take your redundancies? But that's what they've been doing for a long, long time.
We're going to push for that even with the MO because a lot of shared storage solutions, they migrate between nodes.
Yep.
That'll be if that back end goes in.
Yeah, VM migration might, but if you have it all in one storage already. But most SANs that I've dealt with, particularly the high ends, they have at least 2 heads, if not more than that, right? So you end up with multi-pathing. If you want to make storage hard, then start looking into clustering. And looking at how do you actually configure multiple access paths and security and everything else on top of that. And not only that, you need to configure it, you need to test it. And if you do it wrong, you lose all your fucking data, and where you then, right? And it's...
So FoundationDB has a, and it's amazing that Apple open sourced it after they like took it and killed it, but they have a really series of interesting series of strange loop talks about how they tested all of their stuff because they built this really big distributed key value store that Apple uses to store petabytes and petabytes. Yeah.
So,
yes?
Most of the clustering I see with the Raspberry Pi stuff, it's always, you know, maybe one, you know, Pi 3 with a bunch of zeros. Why the push for all the zeros when you know, the 3, I think, is the quad-core process, and the zeros are single?
So the, well, first of all, the zero, so the zero is a smaller form factor.
Yeah, no, I get that.
Right, and,
section has got, as far as horsepower, maybe not.
True, but then if the price difference is 6 times the, 6 of the price of the other one, I can have 6 of them add together and I have more power, a lot more power than would have in one of those, right? So the idea would be if I can cluster 5, I can cluster 10.
Yeah, but like, so like, you might be able to get a Pi zeros for $5, but generally speaking, they're like $10.
Yeah, and if you only buy them one at a time, they're a lot more expensive. But yeah.
And you know, Pi 3 is $40, so three zeros is one.
And it's not, but processor-wise, it's more on the memory side that I notice a difference on them. But it's all the I/O stuff that you don't have on the zero, which of course for a cluster I don't care about. But, you know, it's all meant for Wi-Fi connections and all that stuff, and not, you know, you don't have your plug for the network or all the big USB blocks and all this stuff. You have the little ones, and you have to convert your HDMI because it's also small.
Yeah, part of it. I just more from a pure core count over processing.
Yeah, the processor is pretty damn close to being the same. And if I look at
a single quad core versus a single core.
I mean, between the Pi 3 and the zero, it's not the processor that I see. It's the memory inside of it, but its capacity. I mean, from a core perspective, I don't recall seeing a big difference on it.
Well, one's a quad core, and one's a single core.
Not that I saw last time, but okay, it's been a while. I mean, maybe someone can look at it. But if, I'm not saying you're wrong, but if it's a single core, that may kill some of the fun, but it still takes the idea of putting together. Like, a lot of the clusters, the story I talked about, I've seen in the past, have all been with Pi 3s put together.
1 4 GHz, 64-bit quad core on Cortex A35 for.
Yes, that's 4 core, right?
That's quad core. I think the zeros are singles.
Yeah, the zero is a single core.
Is it? Yeah, so
so that okay. I put a small ISO multiple ones up.
And I'm not standing here saying that 4 cores equals 4 processors. We all know it's not the same thing. But if the software is made the right for it, you can actually you can get some advantage. The thing is the less CPUs you're powering from a power perspective.
And that and part of the drive to zeros was for less power consumption, right? Which
yes, oh absolutely.
Which although all the stupid tutorials I see on it never puts them to sleep. Oh, we have to wait, let's do a loop. Like, I mean, it's like, hold on a moment, right? You said you bought this for
It's just more what I've seen a lot of that stuff showing up in the early, they're very cute the way they put them. Like that one board you put out on the thing where it has the 4 of them lined up. It looks perfect. I just always figure I don't know why everybody focuses on the zeros for the compute.
Well, it really depends. If I was going to do cryptology, or if I was going to do crunching some data analysis and stuff like that for real, yeah, the more cores the better, right? Particularly if I can set up the individual workers to really take that into consideration. Absolutely, right? If you do distributed computing in general, like a lot of our universities do when they they're do their research and they go into the data crunching for days, yeah, the more cost the better. I mean, although again for $5, if you all you need to do is add more pies going down the road. But yeah, you're right. Now you need 4 of them to make up for the cost.
Almost equal. If you get a 10, $5 again. No, it's just a thought because I see a lot of that and I never understood that.
I mean, that again to me, what really fascinates me about these things is, yeah, compared to my laptop at home or this, there's nothing there, right? It's limited, it has almost no RAM comparison, and if I run it hot, it just dies. Right? It's just not meant to do that. But I can run a lot of those for the same price I run one of the big ones.
But you need to well, you run those things pretty hard. But you're right, if you have either just the...
Okay, so hot by hot, okay, so my problem is they're 3.3 volts. And if they're 3.3 volts out, so when I start driving a lot of them with stuff, they get hot. Meaning from amp perspective.
What's saying 3.3 volts?
All your GPIOs on the Raspberries compared to the Arduinos and all. But again, it just...
That's the big transistor switches.
I burned them. I killed 2 pies by putting too much power to them. So you have to be careful.
A lot of times, they'll show you use the pi as a signal and then you use a...
That's still what I did. It was not enough. Driving huge LED matrix 6 was just not in its forte.
Use a transition switch and then you make that.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Building on his question, why is having 4 single-core processors better in terms of number crunching ability than 1 quad-core?
I'm not saying it's better.
Faster?
It might not be better, but again, from a pricing perspective, it's still cheaper. And I can still, if I still have, if my idea is to run single threaded processors, but a lot of them, it doesn't really matter whether they run on the same set of, same physical CPU on multiple cores, except that we all know they are not fit literally separate. Right? There is some synchronization issues between them. So you do get a smaller benefit, theoretically, by having it on independent hardware. However, what those things can do in the shares approach, they can share memory. Right? So they can literally go in and initialize once, and then all the processes you run now have the same read-only memory. They only have their own little write, which makes it a lot more efficient.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
He thinks his mother's more important than us.
I mean, yeah, well,
Between him and Susie, there's no freaking dedication.
Man, we're going downhill, aren't we?
I know.
Well,
family taking precedence over.
Excuse me.
yeah, I mean,
What you said about employing this small Raspberry
All right,
Pi,
thanks again, Hunter.
each having their own relational database, I believe distributed, from little I know, distributed computing, they don't use relational databases, they kind of use the other type, so that the computations are much more efficient, I think.
So I'm not sure I understand. I mean, relational databases have come a long way since I started distributed stuff in the 80s, but they're still basically the same thing in theory, right? We've done a lot. So to me, when you read theory about relational database, C.J. Date, does anyone remember that guy? Mm-hmm. Right. So he basically wrote the Bible of relational databases.
Yeah. Sometimes I curse like that.
That's right. Because he's extremely purist, right?
Voice and cod.
Right, talk about normalization, right? But if you're not at the 5th or 6th level of normalization, you're not okay in relational databases. But we all know we have databases breaking in the 3rd normal form, right? Even 2nd at times. And then we introduced tables that were nested and broke the 1st normal form, right? And we did that because it was freaking faster, right? We knew that, hey, if I could do this without having to go 50 blocks, but I could do it all in 1 block read, it will be faster anyway. So if you look at it from a purist perspective, it goes, but then now you're killing your flexibility and all the cool stuff that we invented relational databases from in the first place. But he also set out some of the relationships from, if you have one database over here and another one over here, how do they actually operate together in the same transaction? Right? What happens if one database fails mid-write and the other one is already finished writing and you need to roll back? We have two-phase commits, even three-phase commits. Based on that, I mean, this is where computer science to me gets fun. This is where you really go, holy crap, like I have to keep this in time. Is this timestamp new or do you use timestamp, do you use semaphores, and how do I set it all up? That's not what I intend to get the Python. They're too small for that. But to me, relational databases got destroyed 15 years ago. Like, the moment we introduced XML into them and called that, hey, this is still a relational database, I just go, no. I like the idea, it's a cool idea, but there's no, don't call them relational database anymore. Document databases and all that, fine. And see how much they stay around. But anyway, but that's just my personal feeling on that. But generally, yeah, relational databases, I think on the way out from this is how we do data crunching. We still have huge enterprise systems. Well, you'll be surprised. Even when you do your taxes, you're not on a relational database. But do sensors, do any kind of things that has a lot of data, and you have old data systems, data sets, they're most likely still relational databases. But would they use that for new projects? I'm not so sure. We will see, right? Because the moment we go to Library of Congress, they're going to curse you again because there's a new data format that they have to support. But that's a completely different story. But yeah, data optimization, distributed power in general. We have internet today because of distribution of resources. Right? The whole idea was we didn't want to have a central source for everything. Remember, it came out of the DoD, and that was the foundational idea behind the internet was no central node anywhere, owned everything. If you ask me, that's what Amazon is today. But you all saw what happens when S3 is out in one region, the whole world stops working for a while. That was not the intent to me of the internet. That was to break that pattern of putting everything in one basket. So we've always done distributed computing to me with the internet in mind, where we, like DNS, look at how DNS was constructed. Even though today it shows its age. And can we keep up with our security requirements and all that stuff. But it was meant to be, hey, you're not depending on a single box to figure out whether this node exists or not.
One company owns quite a few of those nodes.
What? We've gone backwards. I agree. I mean, it's like, it used to be like, all they did was the top domains, and that was all they got, but everything else around it, the dot domains, right? Everything else was up to grabs, whatever you wanted to do, and you had multiple of those all over the world. Not anymore. Right? I would not be managing DNS today on some level. That must be like. But anyway, I do those. I do a lot of other little electronic projects. I'm not sure how much energy I'll have behind the Pi, but it just fascinates me that it's that easy to set up a cool cluster. And I guarantee I can find use for them, even if I wanted to for work. But the idea that you can just do that for so little money, I mean, even if it's real trees and you get 5 by 3s, it's like $150 for a full cluster. Yeah. Try that with your Intel motherboards and see how far you get.
Have you ever found the equivalent of a power strip for 5-volt connections?
I have power supplies, yes. So,
well, so like, those ones you plug in the wall and it gives you like a power strip looking thing, but unfortunately the whole thing will give you like 12 watts if you're lucky, so you can't get a full 2 amps out of every socket. I've never found one that gives a full.
So what I do is I create my own. I create my own
PSUs.
Basically, I create my own PSUs, and you can easily do a per plot. You can do a current limitations per. So even if you had, let's say, 8 plugs, you can say each plug can only do 2 amps. So you're not giving it, let's say, 10 amps, and you have 5 plugs, and then one of them draw 10 amps. That you don't want that because that burns up the thingamajig and all the wires, right?
Well, I get to find a unit that has, the wattage or the number of amps equals the number of ports times 2.
Right, but often when you read it, it's the whole unit that is, let's say, rated at 4 amps. It's not necessarily individual ports.
Right, I get that.
Right.
I'm asking you, have you ever seen one that had 8 ports on it and was rated at 16 amps?
I made something with 10, but
I have 2.
I can get your name, I just don't know.
AAA and see what they're like.
No, they do not.
They're rare.
Wireless type.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, like, it's kind of an odd use case. Everybody else is charging their phones, and the people in this room aren't necessarily the normal people, but. I said, so why?
I resemble that.
But once you have 5 or 6 of these wall warts, they're tough to fit into the same spot.
It is.
So you take an old PC power supply and steal laptops or whatever you want.
I tend to end up just daisy chaining them all and having one big ass power supply on them, but it's,
Right.
once you know what you're doing, put in maybe a fuse if you're a little bit unsure of yourself, but that's about it. Right? But there's a reason I burn up pies.
Off the shelf. Mine's more off the shelf conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I have always probably also killed quite a few Arduinos, but they're also kind of cheap. Yes, sir.
Yeah, also this coming Thursday is March 14th, so it's Pi Day. So they always have like a special offer, so Raspberry Pi, so me and there go to Micro Center or something.
That's a good idea. My problem is going to the Arduino X, the Pi place, what they call. It's they have good deals, but they short in shipping because they don't. Adafruit, thank you. Right. So I try to find them elsewhere. I mean, I do a lot of online shopping, but I'm not shopping at Alibaba. I'm sorry, I'm not. I can't do that. It's just no way.
We can't shop for
Alibaba, meaning you can really get it cheap. I mean, if you want to buy in bulk and go there, you can get dirt freaking cheap.
Oh yeah, no, I know. Yeah.
But it's like
it comes from China 3 weeks later.
It's gonna say, it may actually tell you it's X, but it's actually Y underneath or whatever, and you have no recourse afterwards. So yeah, I wouldn't do any big shopping there for sure. But yeah, that's a good point. If you are interested in, I wouldn't say IoT, but small controllers and bolts, that probably will be some good deals.
I got some away from there.
Sometimes also they announce a new Pi on that day, but I think the Raspberry Pi 4 is not going to be announced this year. They say it's probably 2020.
Yeah, they also there's quite a few competitors coming out with Pi 2 these days. Actually, a little bit below, a little bit faster, but I think a lot of that comes down to whether people are used to the development environments and stuff like that. But again, I don't really care with the CPU as long as it works. Look at Arduinos, the reason they got popular was not because they had a faster processor. I mean, the Atmel processor was dirt old by the time they released it. They came up with an easy way of programming. That was it. And now with Pis and the Raspberry, you have the, hey, this is how you get started with Python, and 1, 2, 3 steps, you program your LEDs like that. Like you don't have to really know how it works underneath the covers to get uses of it, which means you can take it to the 12-year-olds and they can actually get started really fast. And I think that's cool. It doesn't have to be the fastest one to be useful, but the best one, and the most memory, whatever we can come up with.
Like the Arduino stuff, a lot of times you don't need all that horsepower to turn off
right.
lights and such.
Well, I mean, I have tiny 85s at home, and it's like 8 pins, and they will drive quite a lot on that little stupid chip. And that's even in a big form factor with the big legs on them, but not those things that you need a magnifying glass, a microscope to solder. Right? You can still have it and see it on your finger, but that's about it. Right? It's still small.
It's either that or the teens thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I saw in the news, I didn't get to read the article. Apparently Google is releasing like an Internet of Things, not really an Internet of Things, but a single board computer supposedly to experiment with AI, quote unquote.
Mm-hmm. Amazon is basically, all the backends of their Alexa and all that stuff has been released. Open hardware. I mean, if you're into open source and you don't know about open hardware, take a look at it. It seems to be a lot of our industries out there starting to realize that hackers, people who like to do software, are now beginning to touch hardware too. So we can get very cheap hardware that we can do C code, we can do all the stuff that we're used to on, but it's just not an Intel PC. Did anyone see Torvald's mention a couple of weeks ago that no one should be talking ARM processor because Intel won? I died laughing. Yeah.
I just hate having 17
Yeah.
It's a fun world, but yeah, if you're, what you want to do is just basically set up we can all set up our own clusters and we can talk together. I think we can even use the mailing list because no one talks on it, so no one will be upset. I really, is anyone here aware that we have a mailing list? Not
Yes.
Meetup, but a real mailing list.
Yes.
Is there a list server?
Yeah, so this server, yes.
Yeah, man.
I know you had one years ago.
Yeah,
Still have it.
It's on firemountain.net.
Yeah.
One thing I do miss, there's, like, I guess we shuttered the old cplug.net site.
Tux.org? Is that what you're talking about? No.
Huh?
Something about Tux?
No. There's, because there was where I could go and find the link to Fire Mountain. And actually, for a short time, it wasn't Fire Mountain. It was a little, something else.
We used to be running under Tux, which was, and now we're talking real history here, right?
Yeah.
Back in the 90s, where we're getting to a data center was not
Not
only
90s, I'm
expensive.
talking like early 2010s.
We moved to File in 2010s, yes.
When I first came around here, it was on one mail server,
Yeah.
and then it moved. And the only way I found
Well,
it
that's
was
because
going
Tux
to
was not
cplug.net.
maintained, right?
Not cplug, I'm sorry.
I had the honor to set up the last mail server that Tux ran, and then some idiot gave some other idiot access to root, and he deleted every file we had on server. No backups. So, and then they called me up. Can you fix it? No. Yep. And then we basically had to move because, well, yeah, the servers they were running on were 20 plus years old. They were donated back, as is why I went back to the 90s when Tux started. And the idea of Tux was an umbrella organization of all Mid-Atlantic user groups, and there were a lot of them in the 90s. And it made sense that everyone shared the same hardware. Right?
I was talking about the old Novolog.net.com.
We had a Novolog.com, but that was pretty short-lived.
It was a little more than a bookmark. The punchline what I'm trying to get down to is there's not an easy way right now, because I met some folks here a couple months ago, I think, this is what I'm currently with, like, oh, there's a mail list. Yeah, let me go find it. And I, for life, could not find that damn thing. And I couldn't even tell them what to look for with the kit. And right now,
I almost get you. If you
there's no central place to hit.
Google Novolog,
And we're looking at doing at least a placeholder, because we still do own Novolog.org, or is it?
we used to have .com, but I don't know if you. But that
Well,
was
the
basically
org
tool
page
software.
is still there.
Novolog.com now, it throws you to Meetup.
That's, I think,
Yeah,
was
so,
our
yeah.
workaround, right? And that's,
We're working on it.
and we have. So, suggestions, please. Right? Yeah, firemountain.net.
No, but I think it's Novolog at firemountain.net.
Well, like I said,
I'll look it up.
I mean, I understand that, at the time there was some active content, and, updating sites, keeping up, I get it. It's more, it's called a bookmark. And what it costs, I don't care if it's an S3 bucket sitting in a corner someplace for as many hits as it gets.
Yeah.
If you want somebody's S3 to throw it under, I'll throw it under mine. That bill, if that bill's 50 cents, I'll take
Well,
that.
shit, for that, just get a free free tier account and just change it every year.
But every year you gotta change it.
That's no big deal.
If you
So
Google.
how well we kept up the last site, I don't want any dependencies on a particular thing.
If you Google Novolog mailing list, it comes up right away with a link to the main.
Yeah. And you have to know. So, I know quite a few of us of the age where we all know what mailman is, and we've been around those, but I'm seeing lots of people coming in to Meetup that never heard of it before. So I wonder, is that the best way of keeping up? Because I really, the mailing list is dead. Right? No one's really typing on it except maybe once or twice a month. Is there a need for that? I mean, is the Meetup in person, to me, has always been the bonus. But the fact that I could write on a mailing list to get help immediately was sort of the whole reason.
I've recently talked to people that say, yeah, I'm on the mailing list, and they don't do Meetup. So there are people out there that are not here that are actively checking that email.
What?
Yeah, Beartooth.
I feel strongly that the mailing list is needed and useful. And depending upon Meetup, for anything more than casual conversations and announcements, is a mistake. And I do read Novolog a lot, and I get help from that. And I think it should be maintained.
Yeah, I agree with you. The meetup is just organizing what we're doing now.
Yeah.
And a couple of years ago, I actually, and it still exists, I haven't deleted it, but for those who use Slack, there is a Novolog Slack page. If people would be interested in that coming back.
I'm still, well, I haven't seen a peep in that either, because we had that Slack talk, I've been on it since.
Yeah, I know, and I still am there, and I've seen somebody occasionally will put something out there.
Oh, logged in, I thought you meant.
Well, the additional point is, by having 3 different things, the conversation gets fragmented, and people don't know where to go, etc.
Well, so we don't have questions and stuff like asked on the meetup. Right? Meetup seems to right now be solely focused on this event. But when we talk about what's coming up, where's the decks and stuff like that, but not, how do you do X in Linux? Right? That's not going to be.
And to be honest, I don't want it to be that. I don't think Meetup's made for that.
There's a whole mailing list that works exactly like MailMail. But that means they own it, which was, when we did that move back 09, 10 or whatever, was one of the major driving reasons for why we stayed on MailMail, was we did not want to give Google or whoever else that ownership of that data, because that literally is part of their terms and conditions. They can do with their data with whatever they want.
When I mentioned this same site, take out the Karen's video, so wherever you want to put it, I don't care.
Right, but at some point, you've got to draw the line and say, okay, unless I want to run on my own server in my own house, I have to obey by someone else's rules, but that's why we stayed there. Right? So putting on a meetup only means, well, if meetup changes, gets acquired, at the worst case, we probably have a couple of days to get the data out of there, but that may not be in a format we can use anywhere else.
So without reinventing the wheel or convoluting things, is the Novolog still going to have a web presence in the future?
To me, that's Meetup right now. The problem we had with the web presence in the past is no one wanted to maintain it. If anyone here is interested in getting into that stuff, I cannot imagine you will find any objections that if you want to set up novolog.something and maintain that site.
Just point the domain at any.
And if you want that, I'll provide the AWS environment. If somebody wants to do it, I'll provide the back end. I'll maintain the AWS environment. I'll set up, Git, Docker, whatever. I'll do that side of it, but I'm not a web developer. So
and I remember
pod originally is more or less, as soon as you say something like that,
I just do WordPress.
I'm not well.
We did Drupal last time, and the problem was that has to be maintained too.
I mean, it could be just a
Or the content management system from the couple of presentations.
But still, it still has to be maintained. Someone's job becomes maintaining that.
That's curious. What's wrong with just WordPress? That should be very minimal,
now you can log in and create posts.
Because WordPress has a lot of vulnerabilities unless you keep it up.
just using WordPress.com. Just do a URL redirect.
So, true. So we can have it hosted in Google Groups, and there's tons of sites like that where they own all the data. That may be an outreach.
But I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, what the web presence does. This is very heavy. For all I'm concerned, it could be a couple clickable links of, here's where the mail list is at. Here's where the meetup is at. That's what. Because that way, again, we tell somebody, oh yeah, it's a great group.
But we have that on
Meetup.
So Meetups has that web presence right now.
But I challenge you on Meetups to find that mailing list.
It's a wonderful conversation for the mailing list to put it in there.
Like I've only been in Virginia for a couple months, like I posted, and me Googling, like I Googled mailing list here, I could find it. In terms of someone like me or someone who's interested in joining something who doesn't know this thing exists, right? I avoid meetup.com from all of this spam or whatever. So a centralized point of information that you have all these links, I think that's very vital. It's like basic marketing.
And then it would be a flat link.
We own the domain. We can put a static page up.
Who has access to the domain? Is that John Frank? You do?
I own it. Novolog.org.
It got transferred.
Novolog.org? Okay, we'll talk, and Mark and I will work on getting at least just a basic page. To point where
Does not have to be heavy.
resources are.
Right. Does not
So
have
kind of
to
like
be
this.
Question back there.
On the meetup site, yeah, in the description, scroll down, there's the link for Novolog.com, and as well as some other upcoming Trello.
Should have the Trello boards. It should also have the link in there. But it's not like the first thing you see. But no matter what site you're going to put up, it's going to be a list of things, right? It may not be obvious to do that.
Well, maybe, like I said, I think it's a couple things. Meetup has this thing figured out, and I get that.
Yeah.
You know, no matter what no matter what you may or may not like or dislike about Meetup, it's a thing. Got it.
Yeah.
But it's very easy to tell somebody again, offline, Novolog, Novolog. Somebody will remember that. Anybody doing this stuff, log. Got it.
I will volunteer to help put a small web page together for Novolog.org. Novolog.com should point to the same place.
Confusion. We don't own that domain. I think we let that lapse. So
Yeah, I don't think we own .com anymore.
However, if you go to Novolog.com, it throws you to Meetup. So number one, I will volunteer to do that. Number two, the problem someone pointed out is maintenance. This thing hasn't come to life because everybody has a good idea about content, but nobody, including me, has stepped forward to make it happen. And we can have 25 different good ideas of what should be there, but the shoulds don't make it happen.
So this is the secret. If you volunteer,
right.
It's pretty much going to be what you think works that goes on there. Right. That's the power of volunteering here.
Right.
Otherwise, it's static page of links.
Yeah, I'm very. I believe Mark agrees. If you volunteer to do something, I'm not going to stand in your way on what your vision of what you're doing is, because you're volunteering, and it's. I'm sorry, but
Can't fire a volunteer.
I'm not a. I'm an asshole. I'm not a dick. And so.
Wait, is Kevin still on?
That's live.
Oh, sorry. Sorry to all the kids out there listening. So if you volunteer to do something for us, as long as it's, quote unquote professional, unlike me and my potty mouth, as long as it's professional and looks good and it maintains the open source, vibe, do what, I'm not going to sit there and say, hey, this should be a different color of red. I don't care. It's your vision. You volunteered. I'm not going to stand in your way. I will do whatever I can to get you what you need. And I'm sure Mark and Peter feel the same way.
Yeah, I like to walk around, sorry.
No, that's fine.
You've got your volunteer. I will write the web page in HTML. Just connect with me to jump over to it.
Okay. And what I'll do is I'll create a free tier account on Amazon tonight. I'll give you, email me, and I'll give you SSH access. And
you're going to be at
dude.
I got it.
Do you know my email address? For those of you who don't, my email address is skebi69@gmail.com. Huh?
Say that again.
SKEBI.
Yeah, exactly. What does that mean?
69@gmail.com. And Mark wanted to say something before we.
Sure. Do you have anything else, Peter or John?
I haven't time to say anything.
So, all right. Well, and so quickly and in conclusion, thank you everyone for coming out, and I want to give another shout out to our sponsor, Ridgeline, for the space. What is this? Our fourth Tyson's location? I mean, there was Red Hat, Palantir, the Sheraton.
Well, we've always been in the Western, in this area, right? We've been a lot in the Herndon area, Western. All the libraries around here, I think, have seen us at some point or another. But this is, you know, go a lot. That's where we hang out. But this is pretty cool. You know, my only problem with this building is I used to work here. So that's my only problem with it.
So we were just talking about volunteers, but shifting gears just a tad, opportunities for collaboration and dovetailing off of Peter's talk on the Raspberry Pi. I'd like to point out that there are two sister lugs in the area. There is Fred Lug in Fredericksburg, and they meet, what, the 4th Saturday?
Yes.
Okay.
Not the last Saturday, the 4th Saturday. There's a difference, not all the time.
Okay. And we're just now firing up a new one in Woodbridge, and that's going to meet the 1st Saturday of the month. So you got quite a choice. You got the 1st, 2nd, and 4th Saturdays.
Now we just need to, anyone want to open one up for the 3rd?
So
we also used to have a DC log. I don't know if they actually still meet in person, but the mailing list I know is active, just like ours is, the same level. But so if you live in this area, that may be something you want to reach out to, because they like Linux, they like hacking around too. They may know what's going on in the area if you're interested in events.
That was in Fredericksburg?
Fredlog is in Fredericksburg, yes.
And that's on the north side of town, in Stafford County.
It's still postcode Fredericksburg, but yes, it's on the 17th.
Okay, and yes, I'm going to come down check that out. And they're all on Meetup, so you can find them. You can find them. Okay, so and Woodbridge had its kickoff earlier this month, and we're off to a good start. April's going to be networking, May's going to be Raspberry Pi, and in June, Susie's going to come down and give her recruiter presentation. And
I've got dogs and I've got other.
Just so you'll know, the Fairfax store of Micro Center is open to hosting us for any event we want to do. And I think that's a great way to evangelize open source to, especially the traffic, foot traffic at that place.
I remember them doing that in the past, and we had issues with how they wanted to manage it and stuff, so be careful what's in the
How long ago was that?
At least 5, if not longer, years ago.
It may be a new manager at this point.
Yeah, can I make a suggestion with that? Maybe we do like a Raspberry Pi install fest. They get to sell Raspberry Pis there, and then we're teaching kids like.
Sure, and by no means I'm not looking to poach this meeting, Stephen.
That could be our 3rd week of the month.
There we go. Okay, so,
or we could do it the 5th Saturday of every month, and that way it's not an everyday thing.
Twice a year.
So finally, my last statement will be, what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration. Peter just spoke about his Raspberry Pi. Recently, John Franklin came up and spoke with us about a cloud collaboration with Virginia Tech Lug, and we might be interested in joining that with Woodbridge as well. And as I just said, Micro Center. There's a lot of opportunities. So feel free, find that mailing list, and let's start talking.
Speaking of the Micro Center thing, would you all be open to doing like a Raspberry Pi thing, either in place of one of our meetings, or do you think it would be better as an addition to?
That would be a win-win for them because they sell those things.
Right.
Most of us live there anyway. So.
Well, yeah, I can't walk out of there with, if I walk in there with any money in my pocket.
My wife knows where to track me down, so.
Yeah, it's gone, so. All right, guys, 15 minutes of your life back, not the hour we had before, but.
If you are looking for jobs or interested in figuring out what it takes,
in the back of the room.
Now I don't have to grab all my stuff while I'm talking, so I should trust.
Yeah, so have a great month. We will, for no other way to do it, I will put an email out through Meetup once we have the website in place. And so you have